It takes a village to raise a child, but in this story, the child has to be of legal drinking age. Back in 2010, a group of Calgarians, all with different experiences in the beer industry, were having a conversation about their favorite topic, beer. However, instead of talking about their favorite beer, this conversation centered around how they could start their own brewery. And just like the seeds that start a great crop of hops, the seeds for Village Brewery were planted, and a year later, in December of 2011, the first keg was tapped at a local bar. One of those beer dreamers joins me for today's CEO series. And just like that conversation almost 4 years ago, we are sharing some stories over a pint of beer. Please welcome Jim Button of Village Brewery. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Angela.
Of course, we are drinking out of A&W root beer cups because we don't have a lot of mugs here at the station. But first of all, what are we enjoying?
That's a Troubadour. It's a brand new mild brown ale. Just came out a couple of weeks ago.
We're going to find out a lot more about Village Brewery.
Sure.
But if you have listened to the CEO series, you know that we want to find out really more about the CEO, the person behind the company or the corporation. And in this case, Jim, you're kind of representative of a large group of people behind Village Brewery.
It was a very interesting story. We started as, it actually started as two different groups of people thinking that they might want to start a brewery. And our group called the other group, so it would be in our story, it was Stefan called Larry and said, Larry, who would you hire? If you're going to hire a brewer, who would you hire? Because Larry's been in the industry for 45 years. And Larry said, well, why do you ask that question? Stefan said, well, we're going to start a brewery. Well, where are you going to start a brewery? Well, in Calgary. When are you going to start a brewery? and they came to the conclusion that they both said, well, we're both planning on starting a brewery in Calgary at the same time. So we had about a 3-month discourse between Stefan and Larry, where Larry had a partner and Stefan had two partners, that we ended up realizing that we had the same philosophical belief. Decided that we would have a lunch, get together, and see whether or not it would all work out.
So you're already telling me too much about Village Brewery because I want to find out more about Jim Button first.
Oh, boy.
And let's go way back to the early days of Jim Button. Where did you grow up?
I grew up around the world. I didn't really have a spot. My father was in the military, so we moved around a lot. I was born in Germany, but moved from there to Italy, and then from Italy to Chicoutimi, Quebec, and to Cold Lake, Alberta, then to Ottawa. So by grade 4, I'd already moved five times. Actually 6 if you count twice in Cold Lake.
So that's grade 4. Let's leap ahead. After high school, where did you end up going? Did you take on some post-secondary experiences?
I did. I went to University of Guelph, and then and I got a BA in psychology there with a minor in business. And I had a great time. I absolutely, I look back at those years. Those were a lot of fun years. And
the Guelph years?
The Guelph years. I'm looking forward to making sure my kids go off and go to Guelph.
Good.
My wife won't accept that, I'm sure.
Yes.
And then from there I went to, I actually came out here to SAIT. And I came out for marketing. And I played on the soccer team here. But then I got injured. And I didn't really, the course wasn't the right course for me. So that in combination with not being able to play on the soccer team, I ended up going back out east again and worked in a factory for a while. But after that, I went off to Sheridan College for advertising.
Did you take something from the Sheridan experience to say, wait a second, I think I can see how marketing/advertising can work for me?
Oh, for sure. Completely. I knew. Before I even went to university, before I went to college, I knew I was either going to be a psychologist or in advertising. And I remember standing in the kitchen with my dad saying, well, what are you going to go to school for? And I said, either advertising or psychology. And he said, well, what are you talking about? You can't do, those are two different things. I said, no, they're the same thing. They're human behavior. And I love this. I'm a student of human behavior. I've watched people my whole life.
Really, they are so married together.
They're the same thing. They are the same. The commerce on those are different. One gets paid $300 an hour to listen to you. Another one gets paid $300 an hour to tell you.
So then in those early days, what was your marketing advertising experience?
I worked in a factory after coming back, and while I was at that factory, I was making great money. I told them I actually had my welding ticket. I didn't, and I was a welder for a while.
How do you fake welding?
I remember standing at I remember standing on the floor with this gun in my hand, pulling the trigger, and nothing was happening. And I'm looking around going, nobody's paying attention. Anyway, I ended up leaving Guelph. It was a factory in Guelph. I had a freezer factory, and I ended up getting a job. A friend of mine told me there was an advertising job in Toronto at a company called McLaren Lintus at the time. Actually, it was McLaren at the time, merged into Lintus. Mm-hmm. I was a media buyer. So I was responsible immediately as a group of other 20-year-olds for like $20 million for Molson. So I was actually working on buying TV time for Molson. Awesome job. Absolutely. You got paid, no, I got paid $13,500.
By that standards, I can't remember. Was that good? Was that bad?
My rent was $12,000.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because we lived in a house. So I lived in a house with 10 people. My brother lived in the closet. His feet would hang out in the hallway.
So after Molson's, where did you go from there? You wanted to start your own agency.
I wanted to start my own agency. I'd worked at 3 agencies, mm-hmm. and I really enjoyed that world. I'd always loved human behavior. I'm always the guy that looked at marketing for
mm-hmm.
why are they doing it.
You saw the pros and the cons, though, of the large agencies versus smaller agencies.
I'd been in both,
mm-hmm.
And I thought that there was a different model out there, and so Halifax was really intriguing to me, but the one that won was Calgary. And my brother Hal lives here. He and his wife Constance started up this financial planning company, and so I came on as the marketing guy.
Right.
And ended up doing an awful lot of work with them for about 3 years. So I was helping manage a team of 21 independent financial planners for about 4 years. Didn't really, I saw another opportunity come up. So I started a company called the Event Group with Dave Howard.
Mm-hmm.
And so that company is still running today, and Dave's still running that. And we did that, and we did, you and I did a lot of work way back in those days on that, where we were doing great, all sorts of great, very interesting events.
Yeah.
From a business perspective.
Right.
Including what I want to bring back at some point, Calgary Cares. I would love to bring that event back.
Yeah, and that's one of the ones you're proud of.
Very
from
proud.
That.
It was the most, without a doubt, and still to this day I'll argue it with anybody, the most cosmopolitan event we
mm-hmm.
had in the city. And,
yeah.
And that holds true in the last 10 years.
All right, so you're successful with Dave Howard, the event group.
Yep.
At some point, though, when do you feel like I've got to move on from this?
Well, at the event group, Big Rock, and so along the way, they ended up asking me to join them as their first VP of marketing. So I ended up becoming a VP marketing over at Big Rock for 3 more years.
How did you want to set Village Brewery apart from everything else?
How did I want to set Village? That's a tough question
mm-hmm.
to answer. It seems obvious to me, but it's gathering people around community is exactly what is at the core of our company. And beer has that ability.
Mm-hmm.
And I always knew that beer had that ability. And to be able to create a social enterprise, it's not necessarily a social enterprise, but to be able to create a company that acts like a social enterprise was a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah, and when I say set yourself apart, Village Brewery, I think the neat thing originally when you came on the scene that I thought was pretty cool was the whole idea of supporting the local arts community. How do you go about doing that, or is that just a nice little tagline for Village Brewery?
It is. It's everything. It's where I spend 100% of my time at the brewery. The idea, it's a pretty big number. Try and imagine another company saying a number like 10% of your bottom line going back to the community.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big number, and we certainly, because we haven't made a lot of money because we're so small, we've certainly passed that number. But that's going to be our number going forward. So the bigger we get, the bigger that opportunity to give out more.
That totally becomes.
But we've probably supported 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 events, associations, artists, activities in the last 2 years.
Jim, thanks so much for sharing an hour with us.
Oh, absolutely.
And now you're going to get a whole bunch of phone calls from different arts groups.
Yes, yeah.
The name is Jim Button.